Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into Machine Minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Bob Rogers, CEO and co-founder of Oii. And this is going to be a very interesting episode. Thanks for being on the show today, Bob.
Thanks, Greg. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So look, I wanted to actually mix things up at the start of this episode. I wanted to find out, before we dive into your impressive career, the books you've written, and the story of Oii, can you share something fun or unexpected about yourself that most people might not know?
Yeah, well, actually, I taught myself how to surf 3 years ago.
Wow, okay.
So that's at age 57. And
Wow.
I'm not a great surfer by any means, but I'm absolutely enthralled with it. It's the most amazing experience when you're out there in the waves, and in order to stay, not only stay to surf, but to stay safe, you have to focus on nothing but yourself and the ocean. And it's the best kind of sort of aerobic meditation I've ever come across. So it's just a really, it's really a fun new part of my life. And you can
Love
see
that.
that the background here with the surfboards. It's a full life experience.
Yeah. Big commitment there. I know it's not, I'm in California as well, Southern California, and I have friends that surf and stuff. And I just know that it is a bit of a commitment and also like a mental game of actually getting out of your house early morning or depending
Mhm.
when you're going to go in the evening and making that commitment to get out there in the cold a lot of the times and do that. But it's very rewarding once you do it.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
Love that. All right, let's switch gears and talk about your career, because this is super interesting. We've obviously spoken previously and offline, but I want you to tell the audience about your early career and what really inspired you to enter the tech industry.
Yeah, so I think for me, I started out from a very early age enthralled with physics and math, and this idea that you could understand the universe and nature and boil it down to these simple rules that could be actually rendered mathematically just struck me as so beautiful and poetic that I was very much drawn to science, math, and sort of technology. And then the tech part of it evolved as I was doing my PhD, which was centered on understanding why the universe is filled with X-rays and gamma rays. People don't always know this, but everywhere you look, there are X-rays and gamma rays coming from everywhere. And in some cases, very, very intense, like flashing sources of gamma rays out there. So my in my research, trying to understand why the universe is filled with X-rays and gamma rays and these amazing sources of super bright gamma ray and X-ray emission that are flashing and popping and crackling and doing all this interesting stuff. I found that the best way to study those conditions was to do it with computer simulations and computer modeling. And essentially digital twins of supermassive black holes in other galaxies. And once I unlocked the door to being able to solve problems with computers, I was hooked on tech, and there was definitely no turning back.
That's really cool. Yeah, that sounds like that would do it for sure. So that sounds like a pivotal moment. Did you have any other mentors or influences in your career path?
Yeah, actually, so there are three people if we go across my entire career. The first one was Marcia Maythog, who is my high school physics teacher. And the great thing about her, aside from being a very, very brilliant, strong, smart female in my life, she made me feel like it was okay to be a physics nerd and to just pursue that math and physics passion. That's really important. The next one was Bill Barucki, who was my advisor and supervisor when I was working at NASA Ames Research Center in California, in Mountain View. And we worked on a few things, including studying the origins of life on Earth and also doing research to detect planets outside the solar system. Bill became famous as the PI of the Kepler program, which actually did, for the first time in human history, discover planets outside our solar system. So, very proud to have worked with Bill on that work. But the great thing, I was young, I was started in high school with him, and then through a couple of years of college. He would always say, let's, he would always say, stop, let's take a look at what's happening, and we would step back, and he really helped me learn how to take a complex situation and break it down and understand its fundamental components. That was critical in my business career, and sort of my relationship as an entrepreneur and with tech. um, a gentleman by the name of Shaheen Hedayat, who was my co-founder at Apixio, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. He was a serial entrepreneur. He's had 5 exits, including a couple of IPOs. The most calm, brilliant, kind mentor one could ever have, like a successful CEO who has never mistreated a single human being in his life. That what an amazing mentor and person to have in my life to help me be a good CEO, where you have to be firm but you can still be fair and just. And
Yeah.
it's just he's really had a big impact.
That's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I think you talking about our show's not about him, but it's definitely a learning opportunity and educational opportunity for people, for leaders and stuff like that. If you're going to have great success in life, in business, building companies, hiring, retaining talent, and I mean, 5 exits, that's huge.
Mm.
Having morals and a persona like that is very important, I think. And I can only assume, and I don't know him and I don't know his businesses, but I can only assume he's had people follow him around from business to business and project to project and just trust him and know like, hey, he's on to the next great thing.
100%, 100%. That continuity is huge. That network, I mean, you wouldn't believe the network of amazing people that he has around him.
Yeah,
And again, proud to count myself among that number.
love that. Could only imagine. Okay. Um, let's talk about OII. So, for our listeners who might not be familiar, can
Yeah.
you explain what you do and the technology behind it?
Yeah. So OII takes the data from a supply chain and uses it to build a digital twin and all the tooling around a digital twin to help solve some very major problems in supply chain. When I say supply chain, I'm talking about finished goods moving from suppliers through retail networks or through distribution networks, or finished goods from a manufacturer getting all the way to customers. And it turns out that it is very, very hard for today's enterprise to control how much they spend to get product to customers and how likely it is that the product will be there when the customer needs it. That is the what we call the service level for the product. It turns out that organizations don't have knobs and levers to directly control those things or to sort of control the overall financial impact of their supply chain on their organization. So that results in poor use of capital, low working capital, too much inventory, which then again results in huge costs, especially as interest rates have been going up. every enterprise is being squeezed by the fact that their inventory is costing them more. How do we reduce our inventory without having outages or shortages for customers?
Yeah.
So the OII platform, Opti, literally gives enterprises the knobs they need to control the trade-offs between inventory and all the other components of their distribution networks and the service that they give their customers. So we're tying together the financial with the supply chain, the physical of the supply chain, and both providing tools to understand trade-offs, but also to automatically provide recommendations for optimal solutions.
Very
Sort of,
cool. Very
sort of
cool.
the
I'm
self-driving car of the supply chain.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to the importance of that in some way or the
Yes,
other, whether it's
yes,
being on the consumer end or obviously on the business side.
yeah.
What sets OII apart from other people in the space or other companies trying to tackle this problem?
Yeah, so I touched on one of the things already, which is this idea that we're bringing the financial components together with supply chain. So typically, uh, the operations of supply chain and finance tend to be a little bit separate. They're sort of siloed in most enterprises. And so by actually creating complete transparency to the costs and the cost trade-offs of all the factors of the supply chain, and also how they influence the manufacturing process when it's a manufacturer, we basically create an end-to-end view of how decisions in this part of the supply chain are going to influence the balance sheet, operating capital, et cetera. So that financial view of the supply chain and making it possible to really run supply chains in a financially sort of con- a way where you have direct control of the finances is actually quite unique. From a technological point of view, this integration of a digital twin with AI, including Gen AI, that allows users to ask questions and see the answers to their questions worked out through detailed modeling of their actual supply chain to show them how any change or any factor will influence them both financially and performance wise is
Interesting.
not really any, and no other as far as I know, no other organization has that capability.
That's great.
I
Awesome.
mean, certainly
When
none
did
of
this?
them have a history of black hole model,
Yeah,
the core of their product.
I know. And you know what? This is where I'm trying to like connect the dots. Can you walk me through how you even came up? Like, what was the founding story behind this? Like, what was
Yeah.
the vision? Who was involved? Things like that.
So, yeah, thank you. So you mentioned that I've written a couple books. So I've written
Yeah.
4 books on AI, starting with the first one in 1993, which was called Artificial Neural Networks Forecasting Time Series. And that itself led to a career founding and running a quantitative futures hedge fund, which we can talk about if you want to. But it
Yeah.
was my first foray into research and applications in AI in the form of artificial neural networks. So fast forward, I co-wrote a book on machine learning and big data in healthcare, and then the next one, which is where we get to the answer to your question, actually, I co-wrote a book called Demystifying AI for the Enterprise, and that was a uh, very broad, detailed view of all the different ways that AI and machine learning are influencing different parts of the enterprise, including the supply chain. And so while I was researching the supply chain chapter, and I had familiarity with quite a lot of supply chain stuff, my boss at Intel had been the executive responsible for all supply chain at Intel. So I was sort of in the mix of that world a little bit. But in researching that chapter, I met a guy from England, David Evans, who ended up being my co-founder. He had been a longtime supply chain expert, oversaw some of the biggest deployments of supply chain planning software in the world, including £100 million deployment of Kinaxis at Merck. And he had moved on to Unilever and was doing some AI stuff at Unilever. Um, we sort of hit it off, and he started describing all his frustrations core thing was that everywhere he had been and everywhere he had been aware of, there just were no modern tools for getting control of the entire end-to-end supply chain and turning the knobs and pulling the levers. Everything was done by people, like local people. You're responsible for a region or a portion of a portfolio. You're setting
Yeah.
parameters by hand based on your intuition and spending a lot of time making phone calls trying to get pallets onto planes to overcome supply shortages. And his view was there's got to be a way to use technology to improve that situation. And of course, the light bulb went on over my head, and I thought, if you could understand the details using simulation, but then wrap it in machine learning and AI so that you can make that into a very user-friendly operation, literally a steering wheel and some, brake and clutch and gas, then you'd really have something that could change the game in supply chain. And so that's what we set out to build. And I think we've succeeded.
Um, That's awesome. Uh, Obviously, you've started companies before, been involved from an early stage as well. Nothing is smooth from the get-go. What were some of the early
So
challenges for you? Yeah, it's
yeah,
true. I mean, it sounds repetitive for anyone that listens to every episode, because I like to drill that home that, founding a company isn't easy,
no,
and it's very rare that it's just going to be smooth sailing. I think never.
yeah.
But I like to hear about like the challenges and how people overcome them.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I'll try and hit two different areas. One around product development, because I think if you look at the failures of tech companies, tech startups in general, I would guess that 90% of them are due to the fact that somebody created a product based around technology without really deeply understanding what it is that their customer needs and how it needs to be delivered to work for the customer. So this is a great example. Going in and saying, we've solved all your supply chain problems and we're going to disrupt everything you do the way you do it, isn't going to result in a product that people can buy, right? You can't even get your head
Yeah.
around that. And while the CEO might want that, the CEO is not the one who's buying technology for the company. So
Yeah.
so early on, the biggest challenge was just making sure that this idea we had for, you need to be able to automate this process of setting parameters, of optimizing, of responding to changes in the environment. We needed to boil that down to what are the one or two actual answers that people can't get but they need desperately. And so that took a couple of years actually to get to exactly what are the key features and functionalities that work for our customers. Because again, solving all their problems at once, it first of all, no one will believe you, but second of all, there's no one who's been told to go buy that product, right?
Right.
Products are like, in my area, I'm responsible for this, I need to solve this problem. A perfect example of something that the product can do now that we had to evolve to was in retail especially, but also in distribution. um, you'll have products that actually have negative margin because you're struggling to get enough product available to keep your service levels high, but the margins are small. The cost to get the product to the market is actually so high that you end up going negative on those products. And so um, our tooling allows supply chain people and merchandisers to see what their margin is for each product, and then turn the knobs for groups of them to reduce the cost of the supply chain and make trade-offs to get the cost down so that the margin is positive. Or in some cases to say, hey, the trade-offs aren't worth it. Let's change our portfolio to better perform financially. And those are decisions organizations need to be able to make, but they have to be based on data that's been
Yeah.
rendered through a model. So giving that view, it took a while to figure out exactly where those pieces were. Um, the other area that I alluded to, for me, I've always been a chief scientist and head of R&D, something like that. To be in the CEO role, there were some adjustments for me around being um, very clear with my expectations on people. In other words, managing. And
Yeah.
managing people is a key challenge. I think startups often come in with. I know I've seen a lot of startup founders have uh, very myopic views of how they're going to manage their people and how they're going to incentivize them. So there were some learning lessons along the way there as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And that's such a key responsibility for a CEO. And again, something I'm very aware of from working with VCs and trying to help them find CEOs or CEO founders. That transition from being a CTO or being just purely technical, especially if you're just like very innovation focused, very R&D focused, something like that, to being that overarching CEO. I mean, you can be a technical CEO, of course, there's so many of them and very successful ones, but
Yeah.
it is a mental shift. And it
Yep.
is like different muscles that you need to start exercising, because looking at your overarching org and business and what's right in each department, not just the product and tech and raising capital and being the face of the business and
Yes.
hiring and all of that stuff, it's and selling, it's not easy, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, I will say it's definitely not for everyone, and yeah, it's such a great point that you need to realize that what success as a CTO is different from success as a CEO, and the
Yeah.
fundraising side is one of the areas I think people really underestimate. So that's interesting. Actually, it sort of raises something interesting. We're still a very small company, but I was proud that we were selected one of the top 10 companies to work for in the US by a publication recently. And
Wow.
I think just a lot of that has to do with building a corporate culture that's very respectful of the team and frankly also their personal lives. I People work hard. There are times when we have to really put our nose to the grindstone and get to some milestone, and the only way to do it is to just grind hard for a while. But generally speaking, I want my team to feel empowered to take responsibility. I want them to know that unless something extreme is happening, they're not going to be expected to work on weekends or receive emails and things. And that comes from having been involved in some companies in the past where the culture was more traditional Silicon Valley
Yeah.
VC based and or startup based, and not quite the culture that I wanted. And I've worked very hard to do that. And so far, the result has been amazing performance from the team. And I think it's fair to say quite a lot of loyalty and passion for the product and for our customers, which is pretty. That's gratifying, and it wasn't guaranteed. I mean, you talk to a lot of investors, and they're like, you should be like squeezing every moment, every penny out of all your employees, and it's not always the it's not the only path. That's what I'll say.
No, and it's definitely not the path to longevity or retention, for
Yeah,
sure. If you're going to be understanding about your employees personal lives, lives outside work, whatever other motivations they have. I feel, I mean, not everyone thinks the same way, but like you want to employ people that have a lot going on outside of work, have a passion, have a project, love
yeah,
surfing, for example, or
yeah,
something like that
yeah,
outside of what they're doing, or they're creative or something like that. And then they are able to focus and achieve in the workplace with a motivation for outside as well. And
yeah,
understanding that and balancing it when you ask them to give more at work, okay, how are you going to give them back that
yeah.
time? Or you know
hmm
that's how people are engaged.
I heard something that really shocked me back when I was, doing a hour and a half each way commute, working 7 days a week. These the classic sort of iconic startup life in the past.
Yeah.
And I heard someone it wasn't exactly a podcast, it was an interview of some kind saying, there is no work-life balance. And the point was, you are taking out of one account or you're taking out of another account. And you're
Yeah.
not going to ever, you just have to be very intentional on every single withdrawal.
Huh?
And I thought that was very powerful. At first, it was shocking to me because, oh, I'm working on work-life balance. No, it's like you have to be intentional about where you place your efforts. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just a good framing for me.
So true. I think especially when you're running your own business as well, having the people around you, your significant other, kids, friends, family, whatever it may be, understanding that, but then
Mhm.
you also being intentional with that and aware of your time, right? That this
Yes.
work-life balance goes out the window. You work as part of your life. How do
Yes.
you weave those in, right? You're going to
Yep.
take your kids to school, or you're going to be there for birthdays and occasions and all of that stuff, and time with your
Mhm.
spouse and whatever it may be, but you're still going to work.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll start later one day, but I'm working till like 2 a.m.
I
Fine,
got
I've got
stuff
to
to do.
do. Other
Yeah.
people are sleeping, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's my life and my work is part of my life. So how do you get both of those things in the time you have?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And it's very important to have that clear conversation and discussion with your partner so
Yeah,
that uh, so that all the expectations are easily expressed, if not met.
for sure. And it's never easy. It's not always going to be smooth. And you're always
Yeah.
going to have some tough conversations. And there'll be
There,
times when one's overtaking the other.
yeah. It's interesting. Remote work has had some really positive impacts on that. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not spending 3 hours a day commuting, for example, which is,
It's
you know,
huge.
huge.
Yeah,
And so that's great. The flip and I think it allows from a recruiting point of view, it allows me to recruit from the entire world, right?
yeah,
You get the best people who are passionate about what I do or what we do as a company. That's amazing. And then the flip side for us personally as leaders, as employees, um, is to be very clear to your family about when you're on the clock and when you're off, so that they
yeah.
don't feel that they're always sort of on the fringe of something. I mean, it can be a small window, but it's got to be clear. I think that's an important recipe for success with remote work in general, because otherwise
It's
people
true.
feel like family members feel like they're always somehow hanging on to this other thing, which is not good.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that as well, right? Like sometimes they could feel like, oh, you're always on, you're
Mhm.
always accessible to work, and you're always working. But then the other side is they can feel like you are always accessible, you're always available because you're
Yeah.
there. It's
Yes.
different if you leave to go to an office.
Uh,
They know, all right, that's work time, and then you're back, and then you clock in for home time and house and family. But when you're in and around the same vicinity doing that, you have to, like you said, you have to draw the line. You have to be clear, like I'm on at this point, and that's
yeah.
work time.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, Before we move on, I know we went down a little rabbit hole there, but I love that. I love when
Mhm.
things just pop up. It's great. You mentioned a lot of the stuff that you guys do, the impact that you can have with your clients and stuff like that. But what are your clients saying? Like, I'm sure you've got a great list and some people that are really passionate about your product right now. But what are they
Yeah.
saying about OII and how it's helped them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one that stands out is had a customer refer to it as a game changer for their business, which is
Yeah,
just, that's that's exactly what you want to hear as an entrepreneur, right? It's I'm not here to create a little incremental improvement in something. I do want to change the game. That's the thrill of being an entrepreneur and innovating. So that was a great piece of feedback. Um, we've got a customer who usually the impacts are we've had impacts on revenue. So it's interesting. You think about improving the efficiency of your supply chain, and quite often that's an opportunity to reduce cost, to improve capital efficiency, to reduce for instance, take inventory off the balance sheet. But actually, there are revenue opportunities as well. So we did a project where we re-optimized the entire supply chain of General Mills in India. So the entire country for all the products that they sell there. And at the end of the day, we reduced their inventory by like end-to-end inventory by over 30%, which was financially a huge impact for them in terms of
Yeah.
cost and capital efficiency. But the thing that was really amazing, and which they were extremely excited about, was we actually made it so that their products get to market 14 days faster from the day they're manufactured. Now, if you're selling food
14
products,
days.
yeah,
Wow.
it's
That's
a
crazy.
huge impact. And
Yeah.
so to have, they've commented multiple times, in fact, they've always been a reference customer for us. Um, you know, this impact on getting these food products, which have finite expiration times, to
Yeah.
the store. It means less waste and less discards, which is just better financially and better for the planet, and
Mhm.
more revenue in their case, because when your product is fresher longer, it sells. You get more opportunity to sell it. And so that was a big one. We have another one on the revenue side that literally, by helping them model and optimize their supply chain and then take that information to their financiers, they were able to fund more inventory. They ended up increasing their revenue by 60%, which was just, I mean, talk about a game changer for a company. A 60% revenue increase
Insane.
was life changing for them. So that's been
Those are big.
exciting, and we continue to help them tune how they run their supply chain to better and better serve their customers and grow their business.
Yeah. Those are big numbers on both sides. On both
Yeah.
sides. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, well, I know we touched on earlier that, this isn't the first company you've helped found,
Mhm.
and it's definitely not the only company that you're involved with. Want to switch gears again for a second. Can you give us like an overview of the others that you're active with right now? Because I know you like have advisory capacity and other things,
Yeah.
but sure.
Yeah. Thank you. It's good to have an opportunity to highlight them because, of course,
Yeah.
they're amazing companies, which is why I'm involved with them. So,
Oh, yeah.
I'm a chief scientific advisor to a company called Evidium, Evidium. They have built technology to make AI reliable for healthcare. So this is a practical way, because you can't, if you're diagnosing patients or recommending treatment or even monitoring them, you can't have hallucinations. And as we all know, hallucinations in AI are a major problem, and it hasn't been solved in general, right? And in fact, when we talk about the future of AI, eliminating hallucinations or controlling them is going to be one of the things that I look to as a big breakthrough in AI. But what they've done in healthcare is combined um, large language models with the more traditional ontological approach to medicine. That is, concepts are sort of related to each other on a graph. And so, by combining those things in a very clever way, they've actually created tooling that is very, very precise about medical language, and makes it possible to essentially compute on patients' charts, and then also to create computable versions of guidelines. So, medical organizations, each specialty organization puts out guidelines about best practices and all this. And it's funny
Yeah.
because not all the guidelines even mesh up correctly. So it's a wild, wild west. All of that is created by hand in writing based on scientific literature. And so the Avidium system can actually take guidelines and render them into computable forms that can be compared with actual care, to measure compliance, to make recommendations, to understand where patients are, and also to impact the administrative burden of figuring out who did what and whether they should get paid for it, which is itself a giant tail wagging the healthcare dog, at least here in the U.S. Um, so huge fan of Avidium, the technology of the CEO, Carl Bate. Just absolutely love Avidium. So there's that. Then the other one is BeeKeeperAI, which I'm super proud of. It is a spin out from UCSF Medical Center and is based on patents that I and a couple of other people wrote when I was expert in residence for AI at UCSF. And
Nice.
we had just created the world's first, in partnership with General Electric, created the world's first FDA cleared AI on an X-ray device. And small commercial plug. That's the GE Critical Care Suite, deployed worldwide in ICUs and saving lives every day.
Amazing.
I'm
Yeah.
super proud of it, and it's what you get into a career like mine for. Like, it's what motivates me. But anyway, what we found was assembling the data sets about patients. This is private patient data that were broad enough to cover all the different types of patients, all the different care settings from different organizations, was extraordinarily costly and time consuming and required bespoke technological and regulatory setups for every single place where the data came from in order to ensure privacy and regulatory compliance, et cetera. And we thought, there's got to be a better way to make it possible to compute on private data. And so using technology, part of which I learned when I was chief data scientist at Intel, we built a technology that allows algorithms to come to data and optimize on the data without ever seeing the data or moving the data, and where the algorithm is also protected. So in other words, it's a completely secure platform where both parties are protected. The algo comes to the data, it can be federated, so you can have multiple data sources contributing to a single algorithm. And everyone is secure, and even Beekeeper can't see any of the private data. And so that was spun out by UCSF as Beekeeper AI. I'm a co-founder and chief scientific advisor there, and
Nice.
spend some time each week advising them. It's a very, very cool technology that I think is going to eventually really end up having a profound sort of foundational effect on how computing is done. Because if you think about it, all computing should be as secure as possible. And we started really developing for healthcare use cases, but interestingly, we now have some Department of Defense use cases as well. Because if you can ensure that whatever's happening in the CPU or the GPU is protected from prying eyes under all circumstances, that is a very powerful technology for doing computing on stuff that you don't want the bad guys to see.
Yeah, I bet. That's awesome. Really cool. You sound very busy.
Eh,
What
yeah,
what
it's
have been
fun. I mean, it's everything is like interesting mental engagement, and
yeah,
it's people that
and your
I'm
passion.
working with, and all of these companies are just astounding. So my job is
Yeah.
just to light the spark and add maybe a tiny bit of fuel, and then people kind of can take off. OII is
Oh,
really my day job. That's where I'm
nice.
spending
Okay.
almost all my time.
What have been some of your biggest challenges that you face as an entrepreneur, and how have you navigated those?
Yeah, so the biggest, it's interesting. We talked about product. I was trained early on in product management and marketing, and I always carry that, the core of what I do. So that thing about building a product that solves a customer's problem, a burning problem, is just natural for me, and I do it. So that, I'd say that's always something you have to continually fight for, but it's not been as big of a challenge for my companies. The thing that has been most challenging, it goes back to our discussion about the transition from technical roles to more like CEO. Um, you have to make decisions about people and whether they're, when you see something concerning in how someone is interacting with a team or with a customer, you have
Yeah.
to be ready to act very, very quickly. You don't, my natural inclination is to wait to build up lots of, give, do lots of coaching. And I'm still a big fan of giving coaching to your team and helping them overcome some, because everyone's got a little wobble here and there.
For sure.
But as a CEO, especially a startup CEO, you have to make decisive decisions about who is a good fit for your company and who is treating customers and employees the way you want them to be treated.
Mm,
You have to be ready to make those decisions sooner rather than later. The collateral damage from waiting is can be profound, and I've seen that in all my companies.
yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
that's a big one. It's just important to be really clear with your expectations, and then make sure that your team culture, that the people on your team are supporting each other and acting the way you need them to act.
You are preaching to the choir. I a big focus on that, obviously, in the hiring space, and I
Yeah.
understand, like, from the internal aspect as well as external, how that is. I don't want to answer the question, so I'm going to pose it to you. I don't want to give the input, but not making those decisions and not rectifying whether it's a wrong hire or wrong direction or wrong position for someone, what impact can that have on your business? What have
So
you seen it do?
yeah, so what I've seen, I mean, I've seen impacts on customers making decisions not to. Well, it's interesting. What we've had is customers who have paused decisions, and that they generally have eventually come back because there aren't a lot of alternatives to what we do right now in terms of the way we put
Yeah,
everything together. And so the value proposition is compelling, and they will often come back. But I don't want a customer to think twice about working with my company. So that's a huge one. Like that's just a giant, like
right.
we have to make sure. But internally, in terms of the team and the company, um, you absolutely will end up, if you don't take those actions, you will end up with all the people who you have concerns about will stay, and all your great people will leave. And then what kind of a team do you have? When you're a startup, you
Yeah,
can't afford not to be astoundingly efficient. And
yeah,
so it literally, who do you want in your team? The people that you know are team players and astoundingly productive, or the people who you have concerns about, and after a couple efforts at coaching are still not turning the corner. It's just it become framed that way. It's an obvious choice, but of course you want to give every single individual the best chance possible, and sometimes people come from different backgrounds and may not know. So you want to make sure you communicate clearly and
yeah,
coach, but you can't keep coaching if the coaching isn't like hitting. If the coaching isn't hitting, then it's time to take action. And it's interesting. One of my co-founders at Oii, a fellow named Vishnu Vyas, I actually worked with him at my previous company, Apixio, and he's a great example of the kind of person you want to stay on the team, because he's a he's truly a computer and machine learning super genius, but he's also the nicest person you'll ever work with. Anybody that he works with, they come away saying, "Wow, I learned so much. I loved working with Vishnu." So he's not just a 10xer; he's probably a 100xer. To to risk someone like Vishnu not feeling that it's worth working together would be devastating to the vision of the company and my personal experience. So when you weigh it out that way, and it's not like Vishnu is like sensitive about things, because he's not. He really like just keeps going and going. But the point is, you can't risk someone like him leaving because someone who's not really playing by the rules is continuing to be difficult. So yeah,
yeah. The
it's
ripple
crucial.
effect of a bad
Yes.
hire or a bad employee are, it's really hard to quantify sometimes, because, and also realize, unless you take a step back. And that's another challenge, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
making that transition to be a CEO, or having so many things to juggle, one being
Yeah.
building your team and retaining your team. um, if and when you have bad apples, they can rot everything,
Yeah,
and you have
really true.
problems, milestone problems, obviously collaboration issues, carry on. And like you mentioned, customers. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for a B2B software company at your stage, what organizations are you looking for like the strongest team members in when you're hiring? Or is it just at this stage, like still across the board because it's lean?
Yeah, it's really right now it's across the board. And interestingly, one of the things this just sort of triggers a tangent for me, if you don't mind. One of the
Please.
things that I've seen is a huge trend for tech companies to set up these gigantic technical interview exams.
Yeah.
And all these tech people are out training, taking courses just to pass employment interviews. And honestly, I think there are some, and maybe in big tech companies this works, but for what I've seen in startups, if someone is just technically, first of all, I don't know that preparing for an exam is necessarily preparing to be a good thinker, even technically, right? So
Yeah.
there's that. I don't know that it biases toward really, really great tech people rather than just people who are focused to, do the work to get to pass that test. That's a good attribute, but it's not the most important attribute in a startup. But it certainly doesn't put the focus on the things that make people really, really valuable to a team,
Yeah.
like the way they can develop a synergy with others and their ability to learn and adapt and think creatively. And, until the AI takes over, those are the kinds of people that I want.
Yeah. 100%. It's a data point at the end of the day. I mean, don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. If you're in a technical role, you have to have the ability, you have to be able to produce, you have to be able to, the bar, whatever your organization is, you have a bar of ability that you need people to be at or
Yeah.
above, right?
Basic foundational principles and technical skills.
Exactly. But then being a good person, working collaboratively, being able to communicate, being able to take direction, being a good human at the end of the day
Yeah.
is what's
Yeah.
really going to matter, because the technical element, I don't want to say anyone can do it, but right, if you've got a pool of people that can do the job, those are the things that are going to make the difference. And culture is different at every company, right? Some people, especially in technical roles, or especially if you're remote, sometimes you just want someone head down in the corner to just take
Mhm.
direction, doesn't have to interact and just produce the product. Great, fine, if that's how it is. But especially in a small company, especially in a startup, when you're pivoting, when you've got, milestones to hit, or rapid scale and a pace of work, you need a certain type of employee. And you have to be clear on that before you go to market, before you go to hire.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, you just triggered something else, which is an experience of mine, which is I'm a big fan of offshoring certain aspects of work. There are
Yeah.
times when that's really, really valuable, but the way I've seen it go wrong highlights this sort of difference between being clear about what you want and just having technical knowledge. So one of the things that I've seen is offshore teams can go off and build the completely wrong thing during a sprint. And the reason is not that they're not technically competent. The thing that they built works perfectly and they built it in record time, but it was the wrong thing. The reason is they will have different basic assumptions about how they think about customer or how things should work or interactions. And so um, people who can't listen to the context and understand what is it that we're really trying to do here can build a technically competent thing that's wrong and doesn't work for your customer. So it's just all that sort of nuance about how do we all communicate without having to articulate every single, period and comma. It's an important part of building a team. And absolutely, if you give the right requirements to those offshore teams and you also qualify them well, you can get amazing things out at lower cost. But you have to understand how important that listening skill
Yeah.
is.
It is so true. And I, as well, I'm a big fan of offshoring certain tasks and certain things. But part of it is cultural, depending on where your team is as well. Like some people and some cultures take direction well and
Yeah.
can do exactly what you say. But if you have a team locally or you're in person, sometimes what you communicate is interpreted in the right way,
Yes.
again, culturally or in person, and they understand what you're actually trying to communicate. Whereas offshore, again, depending where it is, it's just to the T of what they've interpreted, and you might
Yes.
not be communicating it effectively or clearly. So
Hmm.
there isn't much. I don't know if innovation is the right word. Sometimes it's just like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It will come to me in a second. But the, initiative with
Yeah. Yeah.
the direction or the task is just done to the T of what's communicated. And as a leader, you can always do a better job of communicating.
Yes.
It needs to be
Yes.
clear. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a it, and that's a great. That's just a great reminder for all leaders that that's always true. That next level of nuance, clarity, and communication is important, and you may or may not be achieving what you thought you were achieving.
Definitely. Definitely. Um, so before we start to wrap, I want to start talking about the industry as a
Yeah.
whole. What trends and advancements in AI are you most excited about at the moment? Because you must have like quite, or I mean, you must have, you do have an overarching view right now with everything
I,
you're involved with.
yeah. Well, I'm lucky to have a network of incredible experts who I can talk to on a weekly basis and hear what's the latest. So, of course, just in general, setting the tone for AI. I mean, the pace at which things are advancing is crazy, right? I mean, it's very exciting. It's also, it's hard to keep your mind wrapped around all the different things that are changing. I'm a big fan of the sort of think of doing computations with AI as a graph where every node in the graph is an AI, and so you're building you're setting objectives for the entire graph, and then the graph
Yeah.
is optimizing to give you sort of dspi type. It's sort of langchain plus, dspi is the one that I'm most familiar with in that regard. I think that's now, but I think that's going to continue to be really important, and that sort of paradigm is going to grow. um, I'm really really excited about the day that we kind of have a better handle on hallucination, because the way I characterize Gen AI today is Gen AI doesn't know anything, but it talks a good game, right? That's kind of where we are, and that's great for a lot of applications. In fact, I'll tell you the way, just to toot my own horn a little bit at OII, what we've built with Gen AI is a super user of Opti. So rather than putting private customer data into an AI service and asking it to answer a question, which I feel is a security risk for my customers, and B, highly subject to risk from hallucination. I don't want to give my customer an answer, oh, well, the AI got it wrong, sorry. That's
Yeah.
not acceptable, right? So what we've done is we've trained a middle layer using AI services to be an expert user of Opti. And so when a customer asks a question, Opti gets to the AI. The AI formulates a strategy with the Opti tooling and hits the APIs and orchestrates that without ever having access to the data itself. And so we end up with this really powerful way of enhancing the user experience, getting the right kinds of results, but never trusting AI to be um, completely accurate or secure. So I do look forward to the day when things are a little more secure and a little bit more less hallucinatory. Um, just in terms of my own space, supply chain, there right now supply chains operate on a principle that you set levels in advance for things like, when am I going to replenish a distribution center? How much am I going to replenish by? And the assumption is that the world is going to act rationally and that these preset levels are going to somehow be adaptive enough to make the supply chain run effectively. But there's no reason with modern technology that one couldn't use agents to actually figure out exactly where every piece of inventory goes in order to achieve your global objectives with constraints, and also messaging continually. What do we see coming? What are the changes? What are the, in other words, this sort of continuous level of communication and adaptation by a supply chain that isn't about these preset rules. What Opti does today is it automates changing the parameters in those preset rules, so it's quite adaptive and very resilient to what might be coming in the future. But I see AI agents actually running the show at some point. And that's a little ways off. Don't get scared, anybody. But I think it's that I'm excited for that, because I think it really creates a way for then supply chains across the entire ecosystem to start to coordinate more effectively. And
Yeah,
that's a very interesting, much more efficient way of running things.
sure. Yeah, that's a little further ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, what's next for OII? What do you have like upcoming projects or developments that you
Well,
can?
yeah, we're just about to deploy with a huge retailer in the UK. I'm really excited about that, because I think we'll just have a huge impact for them. And retailers in general are under a lot of pressure from Amazon, Walmart, the shifts in the world from brick and mortar to omni-channel. And so we can have a huge impact there. We're working with a very, very large um, shipping 3PL company. So, a company that's providing assets for warehousing, transportation, containers, etc. And we're starting to work closely with them to help them make suggestions to customers, like, here are the assets we have, here's what we might do to grow your supply chain. And then Opti comes in and shows the customer exactly what that means financially for them and what the operations would look like. And so that gives them a very rapid way to assess different options as they grow their networks. And so that's evolving very rapidly, and I'm really excited about that as well.
Very cool. Can you share the retailers in the UK?
Not yet,
Or
not
you-
yet,
okay,
but I will. But
it's just me being nosy because
It'll be
obviously
no,
from
no, no. It will be forthcoming. Hopefully, in the next month or two, we'll be able to agree on some mutual, press releases and things.
awesome. Okay, cool. Well, we'll keep a lookout for that.
Yeah,
How do you envision OII's role in shaping the future of the industry? Are there like other areas you want to move into, or other things,
yeah.
product and things
That's
like
a
that?
that's a great question. It's a fun one for me. So, obviously, the roadmap can always evolve. But one of the things that I see, because we are unique in our ability to bring in the financial view and to kind of make sure that all the trade-offs, both operationally and financially, are transparent, and giving
Yeah,
those controls, um, I have a suspicion that we're going to start, and it actually leverages off that example I gave with the customer who increased their revenue by 60% by being able to finance a more effective supply chain. I think there's a likelihood that we will find that we can more directly make capital accessible to our customers. Well, it certainly wouldn't be us, but it would be partners, so that when you've got transparency about what the impact, value, and risk in a particular investment in inventory is, then you can start to provide capital at lower cost and provide more liquidity. And I
yeah,
think that's an area where things are probably gonna evolve in an interesting way, and that would be a foundational change for how supply chain financing is done today.
perfect. So I know we're getting close on time here, but I want to ask something that comes up a lot, right, in terms of regulation, in term with AI, in the robotics space. Obviously, I'm focused on AI, robotics, hard tech.
Yeah,
Do you believe innovation should be left to progress freely, or do you think there should be like more regulation and scrutiny on the products and how people are
yeah.
using them or what they're building?
So I have have a strong opinion on this that is formed by my past experience. And this, bear with me, I'm going to have to tell you a quick side story. So when
Please
I
do.
was chief data scientist at Intel, one of the things that I did that I'm most proud of is I co-led something called Intel Inside, Safer Children Outside. And we developed technology for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to help them automate the way they processed leads coming in from industry about
Mm.
children being exploited online. And any horrible thing you can think of that people are doing with kids online was coming through that, and we were fighting to stop that. So we built this automation to help make that process efficient for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And it's probably the most profound thing I've ever worked on. What I became aware of is that the carve outs for online platforms that gave them basically complete lack of responsibility or accountability for anything that happened on their platforms, when it definitely helped the internet grow, but it went
Mhm.
too far. And
Yeah.
so it's very easy for the largest platforms where things are happening, in terms of exchanging content, in terms of doing transactions or communicating, very, very bad things are happening. There's no accountability for what those activities are for the platforms. And that's changing slightly. There's been some law recently enacted to counter that, but 20-25 years of no accountability means these these ecosystems are rife with crimes against children. So I would like, guided by that, I would like there to be some sensible regulation for AI in terms of you can't just freely build tech and then let bad guys use it without, now you can't be so let me be clear. I'm not saying that AI developers should be responsible for what bad things people do with their tech. And in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, if you develop and sell a hammer and then someone goes and hits someone with it, it's probably not something you should be held accountable for. But
Right.
there are gray areas where companies are actually enabling and know that they're enabling harmful activity. And so I think the accountability is around taking steps to prevent harmful activity where those steps are possible. California has just introduced a law that's actually going too far. It seems like they're trying to target only large tech and say, hey, you've got to be responsible for the harm that your tech does. It's not clear to me exactly how it's going to play out, but that one feels maybe too far. Like you don't want to be like, oh my God, if I develop this really cool technology, if someone that I don't even know about does something bad with it, I'm going to be held responsible. That doesn't
Right.
seem right. That's too far. But um, you know, some regulation, some accountability informed by conversations with real tech developers is actually important to safeguard our future. And so a gentle but firm and well informed approach to regulation, I think, is what's needed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Some
Thank
some of
you for
my
that.
tech colleagues are probably going to send me hate mail after this, but you know what? You got to stand. You got to stand up for the children.
Yeah,
And
a hundred
if you look
percent.
into the work of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and also related work by Thorn, it was Ashton Kutcher's nonprofit that kind of worked with them. That stuff is profound and is having a powerful impact on helping children be safe.
Amazing. Bob, I'm going to ask you for all of the links for these companies, these projects, if there's any papers, anything like that that you can share so we can put in the show notes for
Yeah,
the
that'd be
listeners.
fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously the companies that you're involved with as outside of OI, I'd love to put those in there as well.
Yeah, that would be great. BeeKeeperAI, Evidium, beekeeperai.com, Evidium.com, of course, OII.ai. So that's for OII. And I also just as a side note encourage people to reach out to me directly at bob at
Yeah,
oii.ai and on my LinkedIn, because I love to get direct feedback, just to understand how how what I'm doing is impacting people.
Love that. And I will, when we share the show, I'll tag you and everything on LinkedIn and
Perfect.
all that good stuff. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about your journey, about OII, the industry, or any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs in the space?
Well, I mean, two really quick things for aspiring entrepreneurs. I think I already touched ad nauseum on one of them, which is build build a solution that solves a burning need for your customer. And in fact, with a startup, you can't just solve a need. It has to be a burning need, because the barriers to success as a startup create friction. And that burning, when customers pull and really want your product and they need it, that's where you're going to be successful. So that's one. The other one is more personal. My career completely changed when I learned the power of asking questions. So imagine this kid going through a PhD in physics, and you're constantly asked to answer questions. You want to get an A on a test, you answer all the questions. You give a presentation, the Nobel laureate in the room asks you a question, and if you can answer it, you're okay. And if you can't answer it, then you walk away with your tail between your legs. In the real world, as an entrepreneur, knowing the answers is almost nothing. It's your ability to ask questions and not be afraid to ask any question that allows you to get to the knowledge you need to succeed. And also, amazingly, enables your entire team to not be afraid to ask questions and to
Yeah.
therefore get to the bottom of things. And it's amazing how often I've mentored like younger data scientists on asking questions, and they're like, "Well, I don't want people to think I don't know." And I'm like, I guarantee you that, first of all, you're probably the biggest expert in the room. Second of all, if you ask that question, 10 other people will be thinking, "Oh my God, I'm so glad they asked that question, because I had the same question and I felt stupid asking." It
Yeah.
is so liberating and so powerful. So that's my advice.
I'm glad you said that. You're leading by example at the end of the day. And again, that's the culture thing we were talking about before. If you want a culture of openness, honesty, humility,
Mm-hmm.
doing that, as a founder, I'm sure you can relate to this. And something that we've heard a lot is like, hire people that are smarter than you, for, especially as a CEO. You're not going to know the best way to sell, or the best way to market, or the best way to build this product, or whatever. But if you also lead with that, ask if you don't know,
Yeah.
even if they're experts, it's powerful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And it makes people feel free to really contribute without reservation. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob, this has been an awesome conversation, as I
Well,
thought it would be. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing everything that you have and giving us all of your insight. I look forward to following you, following along to your progress, and with your progress, and all the companies as well. I encourage everyone to check them out. We'll put all the notes and all the links in the show notes. And hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
yeah, it would absolutely be my pleasure. And I look forward to anything from the listeners. Just love to hear what people are thinking. So really appreciate it, Greg. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks, Bob.